Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my garage. Today we're going to be starting the build on a full-size Damascus Bowie knife with nothing but some very simple tools. This is going to be a continuation of the series that we started off by building a small knife with $120 of hand tools from the hardware store, and then continue by building that $1,000 simple hidden tang EDC style knife. And now we're going to be topping it off with an all-out, awesome, fancy Damascus Bowie. Before we jump into doing the design work, let's thank today's sponsor.
Today's sponsor is Audible. You can get started at listening today with a free 1-month trial that includes 1 free audiobook and 2 free Audible originals. Go to audible.com/forge or text forge to 500 500. Thank you, Audible, for sponsoring this. Thank you, Will. Let's send you back his way.
Okay, we got that design started off. I'm going to play around with it a little bit more as we continue on with the blade work. It's time to start forging the steel for the blade. Now, I cheated a little bit and I welded up this billet at the shop. However, that being said, I think it's really easy for most people to find a friend or a local shop that has a welder that they'd be able to do this. I mean, it's 6 beads and a handle on there. At most probably cost you $10 to have someone else do it. So it's definitely worth starting off with a welded up billet. I'm going to start the forge. I've got fire bricks now, no longer working with the pieces of wood. I'm going to get a nice reducing flame in there, which means that there's going to be a lot of fuel, a lot of propane. So much propane, in fact, that it's going to have to come outside to combust all the way, and that means that we're not going to be scaling up the billet as we would be if we were using more oxygenating flame, which causes more scale, but it generally gets a little bit hotter. While the forge is heating up, I want to see something. I've got this piece of bronze that would make a really nice guard for this Bowie, but I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to forge it out enough to the point where it's going to be long enough. Right now it's just a little bit too short for the guard design that I have, and I just want to see if it's going to work. So I'm just going to whack on it cold. I know that you can't hot forge this stuff, but I think I might be able to draw it out enough cold to where I can get it to length. You know, I think it's gonna work. I'll have to cut it out a little bit, and I'll just have to hammer down the thinner area. It's a little bit hard to move cold when it's this thick, but I think it'll work out. Okay, so here's where we're at. We got the billet forged out. It's looking awesome. It's nice and flat. It's about 5/8 of an inch thick or so and about a foot long. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire the forge back up. I'm going to grind clean one side, just one side of the billet, and then I'm going to cut most of the way through on the other side, so I'll be able to fold it over and reforge weld it back together with that clean material touching itself. Okay, I got it cut. I did a cut on either side, and 2/3 of the billet on either side is clean. So I'm gonna fold this side over first, the top end, and then I'm gonna fold that fat stack back onto here and forge weld it all back together before forging my blade. Well, it's the next morning now. It's a little bit nicer day out today than it was yesterday, hence the sunglasses. We got the blade rough forged out. It's looking really, really nice. I don't see any delamination, so the steel looks really solid. What I'm gonna do today is I'm going to carve in a couple grooves on either side and stagger those grooves down the blade, and that's what's called a ladder pattern Damascus. Because we've got our layers running straight right now, when you carve in, you expose the layers and then you forge it down flat, and it brings that topography up to the surface of the blade. So this thing came out swell. It is a little bit longer than the original drawing, but I think it's going to work out just fine. It is above dimension in every other way, so we'll be able to work down nice and slow to get it right where we want it. It's now time to throw it back into the bench vise to grind off all this nasty scale before we start working it with hand files. Well, we've done an awful lot of hand filing, but it's showing. It's working really, really well. These bevels are coming out super clean. I'm really, really excited. The clip's looking nice and even. The plunge line is pretty centered. I'm gonna play with that a little bit more because I think I'm gonna convex the edge a little bit before doing the heat treat, just so I have as little as possible to do after heat treat, because I don't have anything other than straight hand sanding, wet dry sandpaper to cut the blade with. What I'm gonna move on to now is doing the tang on here. We've got the ricasso squared up, it's looking good. I'm gonna move on to clamping the file guide on there, filing in the shoulders that I want, and thinning down and tapering the tang so that it's thinner down here than it is up here. Okay, now that we got that tang a lot closer to where it needs to be, I'm gonna move on to doing the hand sanding for the blade. I'm gonna start off at 220, then move on to 400. We're gonna get every surface on there nice and clean, ready for heat treat. Okay, I got the blade covered in a thin layer of Satanite. It's a refractory cement. You water it down a ton and paint it over the blade, and that keeps the blade from scaling up. Because there's no oxygen reacting directly with the steel, it means that it's not going to form that iron oxide. And so it's a good thing to do because I have this edge so thin, I don't want it to be scaling up and losing any material along the edge. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in the forge now. I'm going to be kind of painting the heat along the edge. There's that center column of heat, that flame that's coming down, and I'm going to use that to get an even heat along the edge before I quench it. It's looking really good. It's looking straight. Didn't hear any cracks or anything like that. The trouble's not over yet though. It can still warp during the temper, which really not fun when that happens. But the way that the steel settles, I guess, just makes it so that it's able to move a little bit and bend or dogleg as it cools off. So we're still gonna have to be careful, but right now it's looking really good. So I decided to go on a quick hike while that knife was tempering. Here are a couple shots from that. And now that I'm back, I pulled the knife out of the tempering oven and I did 2 cycles at 2 hours a piece at 415 degrees, and it is looking amazing. So it's now time to re-hand sand the blade. I'm gonna be thinning out the edge and getting the whole thing up to a 600 grit finish. So we've run into a little bit of a huge issue. One of the things that Damascus does when you harden it is the 1080 gets a lot blacker when you put it in ferric chloride. So to my dismay, when I dunked this in the ferric for the first time and pulled it out, I saw this brutal line. It wiped away a little bit, but this brutal line that runs about right there and ends right there, and that's where the hardening of the blade stops. So that means the last 3/4 of an inch or so of the edge is actually not hardened, and therefore this is an unusable knife. So I'm gonna have to figure out some way to fix this. Not quite sure exactly what I'm gonna do because this is a punch in the stomach. It means that I'm definitely gonna have to reheat treat it, and well, the edge is pretty thin now, so I don't know how it's gonna go. Thank you for following along on today's episode. We're actually gonna have to call it there for this episode, but make sure to stay tuned for the next one. Hopefully I'll figure out a manageable solution for this so as to not ruin the knife. Before we end it, let's thank today's sponsor.
Huge thanks to Will for making this awesome video. Today's sponsor has been Audible, which has the largest selection of audiobooks anywhere in the world, and you can get started listening today. Learn more in a bit. Now, while you are sheltered at home, you are in lockdown, you've got a little extra free time, now is the perfect opportunity to get some more information into your brain. We got the whole team working from home, and I've given them a list of audiobooks that they can listen to when they're struggling to find things to do. It includes books on efficiency like 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers, incredible customer service examples like Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, and plenty more. That is just a snippet of what is available on Audible, and I really attribute so much of being able to have a workshop filled with cool tools like this to having been able to soak up information through audiobooks when I was starting out with this stuff, and I really hope that you make the most of your free time now to do the same. So get started listening to audiobooks by going to audible.com/forge or by texting FORGE to 500 500. You'll be getting a 1-month free trial of Audible, which includes 1 free audio book, 2 free Audible originals, and that is just an awesome deal. A big thank you is owed to Audible for sponsoring this, keeping us all entertained, and also keeping us all educated. See you all in the very next one. Thank you to Will again for this awesome video. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.